So sorry for a little bit of a delay there at getting everyone started. So I'm Wayne Springer. I'm the president of Atiwa Computing, and I'm happy to have everybody, our attendees, join us today for our cybersecurity webinar, Demystifying Zero Trust and its role in cybersecurity. And we have two panelists with us today, JC Garcia and Ben Jenkins. And JC is the IT manager of Atiwa Computing. And Ben Jenkins is one of our strategic partners with ThreatLocker, which is one of our cybersecurity tools that we use. And the goal and the purpose of today's webinar, as you probably saw in the invitation, is that we want to provide knowledge and education around the topic of cybersecurity, keep all of you in the loop on what's happening behind the scenes, what the threats are, some new trends, and what we're doing and what's possible out there. So really that's the purpose of it. And I don't want to waste too much time just on the background. And what I want to do is introduce JC Garcia first. He is our IT manager of Atiwa Computing. And JC, I'll let you introduce Ben after that. And if you want to have any comments, and I'll pass it over to you.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, I'm JC. A lot of you I've either spoken with directly or indirectly, email, over the phone, or you might have seen me in some of the lunch and learns that we host. This is going to be a pretty straightforward presentation. A lot of it is circled around cybersecurity, how to protect yourself. And you probably heard me say this before. The goal isn't to make your life extremely difficult with security, but to protect you and not allow you to be low-hanging fruit. So I'll go ahead and pass the baton over to Ben, and we'll get started.
Perfect. Thank you, JC. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben. I am a director of cybersecurity here at ThreatLocker. It's essentially a fancy term for I get to talk about tech all day. Really, that's all it is. Now, what we're going to go through today is obviously a little bit about zero trust. What is zero trust first and foremost? How a zero trust approach is able to help to protect you, and why it is that you need something like zero trust. Now, obviously, to any of our attendees, please feel free to ask questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question. So I always welcome questions so that it's not listening to me talk for half an hour. So please do feel free to ask questions. And obviously, I think we're going to have Wayne and JC. They're probably going to have some comments about what I say as well. So yeah, let's get this rolling. So I guess the first place that I like to start off is, why is it that we need zero trust? Why is it we need this newfangled, well, it's not even newfangled, it's been around for years and years, but why is it that we're seeing zero trust come up a lot more in the news? The White House did a executive order, I believe at the start of 2021, mandating zero trust for certain businesses. So why is it that we're seeing zero trust come out in the news more and more? And realistically, it's because of malware. So let's talk about that. Software. We use software every day in our lives, whether it's Zoom that we're on right here today, or whether it's Microsoft Office or Google Chrome, whatever it is that we're using. We're generally using software in ways that we are thinking about. We know we're using that piece of software. But we also use software in ways that we don't necessarily always understand. So we may be using software in airlines, being able to get planes up into the sky and then bring them down again. Operating theaters, running software to keep people alive when they're on the table. We have, my favorite implementation of software is actually when it comes to ambulances. Now, an ambulance, when it goes to a traffic light, or a stoplight, sorry, the stoplight will try to turn green as quickly as possible to let the emergency vehicle go to its destination quickest to save lives and all that kind of stuff, right? That's software driven, but we don't think about that. We don't ever think that that is software in itself. And then obviously rockets going up into the sky. I mean, rockets are cool in themselves, and that is just software. So we use software every day through our lives when we think about it, but also when we don't think about it. I bought a new car in February. I bought a new BMW, and I found out that you can go ahead and edit the code that exists in your car. So my car has wing mirrors, the mirrors that you look through to see behind you, that can fold in, motorized, essentially. Now, by default, my car does not do that. But by downloading an app onto my mobile phone called Bimmer Code, I can edit the code that exists on my car to automatically fold them. The limits, truly, of software are what we can think of. The possibilities of software are genuinely endless. And that is really where software gets really, really, really interesting. Because obviously, when there is good, there is often bad. Yin and yang, all that kind of stuff, right? Well, if we think about it in that way, there's one statement I'm going to say, and hopefully keep thinking about it while I'm going through this, and we'll touch on it towards the end of our demonstration today, or our talk through today. When an app is installed on your machine, it has full access to everything else that you have access to on your machine. So just think about that while we're going through this today. And obviously, while software can be used for good, it can very frequently be used for bad. And at the end of the day, what is software? Well, software is just an application. It is a thing that provides a service to you. Google Chrome, the service is it gives you access to the internet. It is a web browser. Yes. Zoom, the service it's given us is being able to listen to me talk today. All software is it essentially provides a service. And at the end of the day, malware provides a service. Because, well, what is malware's service? It's to infect your data and then for the hacker to earn money. It's a service for them. And by that logic, malware is just software. Because if we think about it, what's the key difference here? Is it good code or bad code? That's realistically all it is. That's what separates us from good software and malware. Good code or bad code. How is the code used to create that piece of software? Some interesting statistics here. Over 560,000 new pieces of malware are actually released every single day. And there are actually over it's about a billion, a little bit more, but rounding down is easier. When we're talking about billions, you can kind of round down, it doesn't really matter. There's about 1 billion pieces of malware out there in the wild. So it's absolutely insane. And this is why we need to start looking at these solutions, because truly, the malicious possibilities of software are endless, and they are genuinely endless. Yeah, we think back, I used to say 20 years ago, but realistically, it's 30 odd years ago now. We think about the I love you virus that would hit machines. Now, for those of you who are unaware, the I love you virus was essentially a piece of malware that would send out spam to your contacts saying, I love you. Slightly awkward if it was like, you know, your nan that you didn't really talk to for a while, but it was harmless at the end of the day. We then had, I always forget the name. There was a piece of malware that essentially would say mean things about Bill Gates on your machine. There'd be pop-ups. It would essentially say, Bill Gates, why are you doing this? Why are you allowing this? And it was because of some huge vulnerabilities that were actually happening inside of Windows, Microsoft at the time. So the hacker felt that was the best way to showcase it. And obviously with those pieces of malware, they were not necessarily dangerous. They weren't causing problems. They were an inconvenience. They were a script kiddie who was stuck in a basement and they were bored. That is realistically all it is. But we have seen over the last 10 years, malware take a huge shift. It has gone from script kiddies bored who weren't making any money off it. They were just having a bit of a laugh and a joke, and maybe their name goes down the internet for creating the first worm or whatever, right? Well, we've shifted. We're now seeing that malware has become more malicious, and it's now being used as a source of income. The same way that you and I have jobs, now infecting businesses, infecting people with malware is a job. Now, the most common of this is actually ransomware. And here I like to kind of show this really, really quick. So I'm just gonna share the right screen, that screen, perfect. Now, the first piece of malware that actually came out was a piece of malware called the AIDS Trojan. That's it. And well, sorry, not the first piece of malware, that's the wrong term. The first piece of ransomware, documented piece of ransomware as we know it, called the AIDS Trojan. It actually came out all the way back in 1989. So when we think of ransomware, everyone knows what ransomware is now, but when we think of it, we're always thinking of like 2012, 2013, CryptoLocker v3 running through networks, infecting 250,000 machines globally. That is where our brain takes us, but it's all the way back in 1989 that it actually was. Essentially, where it gets its name from is it was a piece of malware that was sent out on a floppy drive out for an AIDS research magazine, which is where it gets the AIDS piece from. And the researchers would take that floppy drive and they put it into their machine thinking it was software. And from there, after the 90th boot cycle of that machine, 90th on, off, it would then essentially go ahead and infect your data. It would rename your file names and then encrypt everything, which is malware at the end of the day. It's ransomware at the end of the day, right? Now, again, 1989 was when this came out. So cryptocurrencies didn't necessarily exist right then. So the author, a guy called Joseph Pop, set up a PO box in Panama, and you had to send $189 to a PO box in Panama to get your data back. That right there was early ransomware, the first documented case that we have seen. And as you can guess, Joseph Pop got caught pretty quickly. PO boxes in Panama are traceable. So let's shift forwards, because ransomware it didn't really take off after that. But early 2012, 2013, since then, it has been decimating networks globally. And one of my favorite new ones to talk about is Colonial Pipeline. Of course, you guys are more than likely aware of this, much more than my British self. But I found this attack absolutely just mind-boggling as to how this went ahead. So for those of you who are unaware, Colonial Pipeline, one of the largest distributors of essentially fuel, gas, across the east coast of the US, was hit by a ransomware attack on May 7th, 2021. I don't understand how you could have ever missed it, because it was literally all over the news. My favorite was getting to watch people in pickup trucks with tarpaulin fill up the back of their pickup truck with gas and then drive off, and all the gas shoots out the back. So it was a very interesting time for news, but it did happen. Now, I didn't realize, but Colonial Pipeline essentially equates to 45% of fuel that is sent across the east coast of the US. So it's absolutely insane the amount of fuel that is going through, and they had to shut down their systems. They legitimately turned it off. They flicked that off switch because they did not know the damage that this had caused. Now, essentially, it's really silly as to how the hackers got in. They used a compromised password that they bought off the dark web online. That is it. So if you take anything away from this session today, please make sure that you shut down your user accounts when your users leave the business. That is the number one thing that I can say take away from today, because right there, that is the easiest way for them to be able to get in. Then from being able to get in using that compromised password, they had access to the VPN, which then gave them access to the entire network. Now, the hacking group behind this, a group called DarkSide, were essentially name and shamed because the president at the time, we have a prime minister, you have a president, your president at the time essentially called them out and said that we are going to be hunting them down because this is an attack on the US, etc. Now, DarkSide came out publicly after that and apologized, which is the first time I have ever seen an attacking group, a ransomware group, or a cyber hacking group ever apologize for what they've done. And they actually said in their statement, they aim to make money, not to cause problems for society. So what they're essentially saying there is that children's hospitals are fair game, charities totally fair, small, medium businesses, that's fine. Want to hit your fast food chain? Totally fine. You can go after that. But we're not going to mess with oil anymore. That is it, pure and simple. Now, since then, DarkSide have gone ahead and disbanded. which is very interesting, right? As to if they have disbanded, we don't know. They say they have. But the attacks have continued. We talk about Brenntag. Brenntag are I believe, a large pharmaceutical firm. They had 150 gig of data that was threatened to be leaked onto the dark web. They paid out 4.4 million US dollars. This was at the same time, and the reason you probably didn't hear about this in the news is this happened at exactly the same time as the attack on Colonial Pipeline. Right there, in that 1 month, DarkSide made almost 10 million US dollars from 2 attacks. You then had Acer, the computer manufacturer. They were hit, and their financial data was actually threatened to be leaked as well. Now, in the largest amount of money that was ever threatened that you had to pay, up to 50 million US dollars. Absolutely insane. You then had JBS Foods. We know about this. We saw this on the news. They got hit. They had to pay 11 million. We have AXA, an insurance company. They've been hit. CD Projekt, for any gamers here. CD Projekt, when they were creating their brand new game, which was supposed to change gaming for everyone, they were hit and they were threatened that the source code will be leaked. And this is a running theme that you guys will notice, and I touch on this a little bit later. You then had Kaseya, a major partner for MSPs. They were hit. And then finally, the San Francisco 49ers. Like, they're going after sports as well now, okay? Like, they are not slowing down when it comes to these attacks. And I'd like to show this graph really quickly, because it's not just large businesses. It actually equates to 70, but these are businesses that were hit with ransomware in 2021. And 32% of ransomware attacks that happened in 2021 were for businesses of 11 users to 100 users. They are going for small, medium businesses. Another 35% were from 101 to 1,000 employees. They are going for these small, medium businesses because they know that's where the money is. So as much as we talk about these large businesses, that is where they're going. And how much money? The average payout is 170,000 US dollars. That's enough to cripple some businesses. And the really interesting thing is that 77% of ransomware attacks now involve the threat to leak exfiltrated data. Why is it they're doing this? Because they know that you more than likely have a backup solution in place. They know that you have a disaster recovery plan. They know that you can get back up and running in the event of a disaster. You may take a day, you may take 2 days, but you will get back up and running. And you will have all your data back. So how can they still make their money? Well, if we threaten to steal your data and leak your data to your customers, to your competitors, to the dark web, where people can buy it and then attack you again and again and again, well, you'll pay to stop that happening. This is where these ransomware attacks are getting really, really, really dangerous. Now, it goes over from there. So how is it that threat actors are essentially innovating? How it is that they infect our machines? Well, they're using, as I mentioned earlier, they're using tools like Kaseya, they're using RMM tools, they're using deployment tools. But they're also using some really cool stuff like one of these, which I'm throwing it everywhere. So for those of you who can see my screen, just one of those. Looks just like a USB, right? Nothing fancy, just a USB. But if I flip it over, you will see I've taken the cover off it. Don't worry, it doesn't come like this. It's got an SD card in it. Because when I plug this in, it's something called a USB rubber ducky. Now, it will run whatever line of code I put into it. And while you may have a USB blocking tool, it will not stop this, because this acts as a keyboard. And your USB blocking tool more than likely does not stop keyboard access. So right here with this, I have a script actually that will take a copy of your data from your documents and upload it to Google Drive. I'm not aware of a security tool out there, apart from ThreatLocker, of course. Shameless plug. I'm not aware of a security tool out there that will go ahead and stop this. Because what is there to stop? It's a keyboard. Or it looks like a keyboard to a machine. So they're using tools like this. They're using tools and vulnerabilities. Things like LOLBAS, which if we think back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we had to attack a machine, we had to utilize systems that already existed or create new software, Well, using LOLBAS, which stands for Living Off the Land Binaries and Scripts, threat actors can use what exists in Windows to attack Windows. They can use run-DLL, which is a piece of Windows, to be able to run code from the cloud on the local machine and not get detected. They can use PowerShell to take copies of your data and command prompt, to take copies of your data and put it in the cloud. Your weaknesses now are your machine at the end of the day. So how is it that we can solve these problems? Well, obviously right now we're using AV, we're using heuristics, AI and threat hunting and ransomware detection and all that kind of stuff. But being realistic, it's not working. We still have attacks that are going on day in, day out on our networks. We still have zero-day attacks that are hitting us. We still have app vulnerabilities. A really interesting one that came out recently. It was announced yesterday, day before yesterday, I think. 7-Zip, the unzipping tool that you use generally on your machines. You either use 7-Zip or WinRAR. You're one of the two. You use one of the two. 7-Zip has a vulnerability at this minute in time to allow you to be able to run applications as an administrator and run any code you want. Now, that's like game-ending vulnerability right there. And it turns out that that's not a vulnerability in 7-Zip. So initially it was announced as a 7-Zip vulnerability. It came out last night. It's a Windows vulnerability, actually. So it's not just 7-Zip this affects. It's a ton of applications that use it's called the HHEXE, the help file exe inside of Windows. And a load of applications use those. So now they all have vulnerabilities. It is absolutely terrifying, these zero-day attacks that are coming through that frankly our AV tools cannot keep up with. So obviously there are solutions, and this is where I like to show this lovely little graph that I have here. Well, triangle, really, it's more of a triangle. I want to introduce this idea of a security triangle. Okay, now currently we look at security as a bit of a layered approach, solution on top of solution on top of solution, and it's not working. We're still getting hit with ransomware. We're still having these attacks that are coming through. We have multiple scanning tools all at once picking up the same threat if they do pick up that threat. So we're essentially paying more for security tools when we don't necessarily need all of them. So let me break it down into a bit of an easier way. We like to look at it from an angled approach. Human training, right at the bottom, just down here. Obviously, you need to be going ahead and doing your human training, right? It's pretty straightforward. Doris, don't click on that link. Don't plug in that USB, that kind of stuff. But let's be realistic. Users will always go ahead and plug in that USB. They will always click on that link. So how is it that we can go ahead and solve that? Well, right now we use things on the left-hand side. We use our detection pieces just here. And they're great. I'm not going to sit here and say that AV tools are not good. I'm not going to say that you should not have an AV tool. I will not say that. But what I would say is that they're not ideal to rely on 100% of the time. Because what is it they're doing? They're detecting. They're telling you the problem exists. They're telling you that ransomware is here, which is great until you then think that, well, what did you do to stop it? Don't tell me that it's here. You should have stopped it before it started encrypting my data. And that right there is when we come into controls. And this is where zero trust sits. So what is zero trust? Zero trust is essentially the idea that we should be allowing minimal access to users and applications across our networks. We can do this by essentially denying access to any application that is not pre-approved, and giving our users something called least privilege. I find that's the easiest way to describe what zero trust is. And if we can then deny by default, so say no to everything by default that is not essential to work, we're minimizing the attack vector that threat actors can use against us dramatically. Realistically, zero trust is the idea, it's the security model of blocking everything by default and following that least privilege model, only allowing the applications that you use on your day-to-day basis to do your job to be able to open and run, and any new apps, whether they be Chrome, if you haven't had Chrome installed before, or even ransomware, be blocked from running. Now, that process that I've just spoke about is application whitelisting, limiting the applications that can run on your network. Now, as we discussed earlier, Anything that's installed on your machine has full access to anything a user can access. And on top of this, we want to limit what these applications will have access to other apps, files, or even the internet. Because once I've said that an app is good to run, how can that be used against me? I spoke a moment ago about the 7-zip vulnerability. Like that right there is how an app can be used against me. I may say that 7-zip's good, but if it then has a flaw in the system, it can be weaponized and used by threat actors to take my data. Well, that's really where ring fencing comes in. So ring fencing is an idea of saying applications should not access other applications. So for example, Office can call PowerShell. Now, PowerShell is a very, very powerful tool that IT professionals like to use. It can be used for a lot of good. It can also be used for a lot of bad. So why does Office ever need to call PowerShell? It does not by default. So why is it allowed to? Block that. Why is it PowerShell has access to all of my data? Because again, it shouldn't have to. Well, I should be able to block that as well. And obviously, don't take my word for this. Take the word of our friendly hackers. So when you get hit with ransomware, often they will have a technical support team that will help you to be able to decrypt your data, if you pay, of course. And this person here was actually talking to them and asked, what can I do to not get attacked anymore? How can I stop being hit with ransomware? And they have literally said, circled in red, approved to run only the necessary applications. Like, don't take my word for it. Take the actual hacker themselves. They're telling you that right there. Remove local admin control from your users. Take away local admin control completely. I understand that you may have certain applications you need to run as an administrator. Maybe it's QuickBooks and it needs an update every month, for example, right? Well, implement a solution called elevation control, where what you can do is run individual apps as an administrator and then nothing else as an admin. What that does is it stops these threat actors from having just admin access across the board to do whatever they want. They can only access individual apps as an administrator. Thus, again, and you'll hear me say this term quite a bit, minimize that attack vector. Stop what threat actors can do to harm your machine or your network or even your data. And then talking about data, storage control. Obviously, put in place USB blocking, that kind of stuff. Be really granular with it if you can. USB blocking is really, really key. There's a study released that showed that 59% of people who leave a business take some kind of confidential data with them. If you have USB blocking tools, you can dramatically shrink that. Because obviously USBs are tiny, right? Like I could just put that in my pocket and I've got data out of the company. So definitely an interesting piece there. The other piece of storage control is limiting what your applications can access. So I spoke about this earlier. Apps have access to everything on the network that you have access to. That's great when you first start to think about Mozilla Firefox or Google Chrome accessing my data, right? Because of course it needs to. But then when you sit there and start to think about that shady application that you installed from a maybe not so reputable website 6 months ago to fix that very niche issue you had on your machine, well, that right there is then where it gets concerning. Or that application that you've been running for years that hasn't had an update in the last 6, well, that has access to your data as well. So how is it that we can protect ourselves against these applications being used against us? Well, control file and folder access based on applications. Say, for example, your backup repository is only allowed to be accessed by your backup software. We're using Veeam in this circumstance. And by default, deny any other apps from accessing your data. Now, these are all really, really simple terms. But by doing all of these, we can go ahead and we can change the paradigm of endpoint security. We can mitigate the risk. We can lower the damage that these threat actors are causing on our machines and on our networks. And I need to be very clear, this isn't going to slow down when it comes to these kind of attacks. We've been following this pretty closely. Internally, there is a ransomware gang called Conti, who released a new strain of malware called Conti v3. in December, I believe. I think it hit a US bank actually in December. Oh no, White Rabbit, which I think may have been produced by them, but big ransomware gang based out of Eastern Europe. Now they have said during this war that is going on that they are siding with Russia, and they are going to be attacking any businesses that do not side with Russia. So what we're now starting to see is this shift of ransomware groups attacking businesses even more, and it is only going to get worse and worse. So the key thing, guys, implement a zero trust solution, because zero trust, I truly believe, coming from a security background, is going to be the best way to protect yourselves against ransomware attacks, malware attacks, data leakage. Really protect your networks. AV tools are great, but they can't do everything. That is where zero trust can come in to be able to protect you. Perfect. Obviously, guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them into the Q&A. I love answering questions.
That was very helpful, Ben. It's just amazing to me that it is just gone from bad to worse. We saw it, especially during the pandemic. And then since this war between Ukraine and Russia, we're just seeing attacks increasing through the roof. And it's just shocking and very concerning.
So I was in, I'm obviously based out of the UK at this minute in time. And I was in our Florida office at the time of the Russian invasion into Ukraine. And the amount of MSPs that we had calling us up and saying, I have seen like a 10-fold increase on attacks on US businesses coming from Russian IP addresses and IP addresses based out of Eastern Europe, was absolutely insane. Our phones were going off the handle at that point in time. So it is pretty insane what we were seeing there.
And when I talk to like our clients, I try to use different stories that they can easily relate to. And what I'll say is something along the lines of, you're already doing zero trust. You're just not looking at it that way. And the example I give is, do you lock your house? How many people have a key to your house? Does everyone have a key, or only family members, close friends? And that's kind of how I equate the computer and the programs. Like the programs are family members or people you may not want. And only the people that have a key can get into the house. But in talking about the whole Ukraine and Russia, the movements I've been seeing, because I do follow a lot of the activity threat actors use, or hackers, and a lot of what I've seen here recently, and it's been an interesting shift. And you started off with the first reported ransomware and compared that to now. I have to say that the creativity and the thinking outside the box is unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
Some of the moves that we're seeing now are, and it's happening in the iPhone world and Android phone space, where mobile apps are being used as the inside tunnel to a network. So anybody who has a mobile device and they connect to the network, they use their cell phone as a means to act as a go-between to try and infect things or objects on a network when a mobile device is connected. So it's at a whole other level. And just to touch base, when you talked about the increase in traffic, we've had a couple of clients now that I've had to implement geo-blocking, where we're blocking traffic from the European, Russia, Ukraine. I mean, at home, I block it as well. And it's unbelievable how much denial, the surface of attack I see, or how many scans. I can't even begin to say, to give it justice. It's like, if you see a picture of the Eiffel Tower, unless you're standing in front of it, you can't really appreciate it.
Exactly. I think the attacks that have been going on have been absolutely insane. So, and it is only going to get worse and worse, as we have shown previously. So I think being as prepared as possible as we can to try and stop these attacks is going to be the best way that we can move forwards.
We have a question that came in from Myrna. Hi, Myrna. And JC, I think I'll probably throw it to you first, or Ben, either one. The question is, we format users' machines when we reassign the machine to another user or to other users. Should we format users' machines every year or every 6 months?
My advice would be absolutely every year. And it's going to be depending on that user. If they're a heavy online user, and it kind of goes back to passwords, if they have a leaked password, then you might want to do it sooner than every year. But with data breaches, what they are, it just really goes back to password, multi-factor authentication, make it as difficult as possible. And my wife, she had gone on to a conference, and she was getting set up on a new Surface, and she's like, oh, this is taking so long to get set up. And it's like, yeah. I said, and you have rights to do this, and it's taking you this long. So someone that doesn't have rights, they're just going to give up. And I understand you're almost at that point, but the idea is to protect your data, your information, and yourself, because that's where the value is. That's what hackers want. So I monitor on a personal space. I monitor all our credentials, and I use password managers. I use YubiKey, hardware authentication, and it really, when I can't use those methods, I begin to question the security of whatever online service I'm trying to set up. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add, Ben?
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, like, clearing out machines is great by all means, but realistically, if the threat's already there, they're probably already stealing your data. I love what JC's saying as well. I think that, like, he's kind of taking the answer straight out my mouth there. Like, make sure that you've got these solutions in place that are you've got that two-factor, that kind of stuff. That's definitely going to be the key thing. It's more, I would say, it's more about protecting the user and the user's data than it is trying to protect the machine. Now, the idea with zero trust is having the idea that your machines are already infected. And how is it we can mitigate damage and minimize damage that is going to be caused on your network? So while, yes, reinstalling your machines is a great idea, I do recommend it, yes. I think it's probably best to have a look at security solutions you have in place and say, well, are these actually going to stop the attack from coming in first? And then I will worry about, do I need to start reinstalling machines?
Yeah, and then I wanted to add something, Ben. One of the things that we've used ThreatLocker for, and I don't think it's necessarily how it was designed, so it's kind of a little feature that makes it nice, is that we use the auditing feature, where we can audit like what files are touched, who touched them, when they touched, what happened with it, where did it go, was it deleted, was it moved, was it copied? And I don't remember all the details of what the audit dives into, but it's certainly been a nice tool to have, even on a normal day-to-day of, oh, this file got deleted. Can you tell me who deleted it? Oh, okay, let's go look at the audit log and take a glance. So yeah, to kind of touch base on the ThreatLocker features that we've been able to utilize in the past with our clients, that's absolutely up there on the list.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, ThreatLocker can do everything that obviously we spoke about today. I like to make that very, very clear. It'd be kind of silly me coming on and being like, aha, here's some features that we can't do. We can do all of that there. And I mean, like, yeah, JC, you've kind of, that's my favorite feature that ThreatLocker does, auditing what files users are accessing and able to give you that idea. So if you know you have a particularly nosy user who shouldn't be accessing all the data that maybe they can, you can go ahead and view that. We store all that data. If you have a problem where someone says, oh, a file's been deleted, but it hasn't been deleted because they just accidentally moved it into a different folder and they don't know where it's gone, all of that is logged. So it's an incredibly, incredibly powerful solution. And obviously, I would recommend if people are interested in seeing a demo of it, please feel free to reach out to the guys. They're more than happy to bring myself or my team in to be able to demo the solution as well. Perfect. Okay, any other questions, guys? Because if not,
any other questions or comments before we close up? I hope this was helpful today. And if you do have questions you think about afterward, after we close the webinar, feel free to email myself, wspringer@atiwa.com, or JC Garcia@atiwa.com, or just call us and we'll be happy to help. Any last comments, JC or Ben, before we close off here?
My final comment, guys, stay safe. That's probably my my number one thing that I can say. Try and stay as safe as possible. It's a scary world out there, so definitely try and stay as protected as possible.
Yeah, and yeah, for me, it's unique passwords. Just safe practices. If anybody's online that's spoken to me in the past, it's along the same lines of what I've been saying.
Sounds good. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you, all of our guests and attendees who were with us today. Have a great day, and we'll let you know when we have our next webinar. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.